The Last Order. Chapter 1. England Before the Crossing. The rain in southern England never fell straight down. It drifted sideways, pushed by a wind that smelled like the sea and old metal. Jack Miller stood at the edge of the airfield with his helmet tucked under his arm and watched the clouds sink lower, like they were trying to press the world flat. Planes lined the runway in long, dark rows. Their engines coughed and growled, warming up like tired animals that still had one last run left in them. Somewhere nearby, a radio played softly, a tune Jack didn't recognize and didn't care to learn. Men were everywhere, sitting on crates, leaning against trucks, smoking too much, talking too loud. Jack had learned that men talked loud when they were afraid of the silence. Silence left too much room for thinking. He checked his watch out of habit, not because time still meant anything. The invasion would happen when it happened. Watches didn't control that. A private nearby laughed suddenly, sharp and nervous. The laugh cut off just as fast, like the man had surprised himself with it. Jack didn't turn around. He didn't need to. 3 years in uniform had taught him how fear moved through a group. It jumped from man to man like a spark, invisible but quick. A leader's job wasn't to kill it. You couldn't. You just had to keep it from becoming a fire. He lit a cigarette and inhaled without tasting it. This is it, he thought. Not dramatically, not heroically, just fact. Jack Miller was 32 years old, which made him ancient by infantry standards. He'd landed in North Africa in '42, when the war still felt like something that would make sense eventually. Sicily had taken that illusion apart piece by piece. Italy had buried what was left under mud, mountains, and names he still couldn't say out loud. Experience didn't make you brave. It made you economical. Jack knew how long a man could run before his lungs quit. He knew the sound a mortar made when it was too late. He knew how to give orders that didn't sound like orders, because men followed voices, not ranks, when things went bad. He also knew that leadership was mostly about carrying weight no one could see. The weight of decisions, the weight of names, the weight of knowing that no matter how careful you were, someone wouldn't make it. He crushed the cigarette under his boot and walked toward his squad. Chapter 2. The Men. Private Collins was cleaning his rifle again. It was already spotless. His hands moved too fast, like if he stopped, his thoughts would catch up to him. Corporal Hayes leaned against a truck, chewing gum slowly, deliberately. Hayes had a way of looking relaxed that fooled exactly no one. "Sergeant," Hayes said, "you sleep at all?" Jack shrugged. "Enough." It wasn't true, but it wasn't a lie either. Sleep came in pieces now. Short, shallow things that ended before dreams could start. Collins finally looked up. "Sergeant, you think it'll be bad?" Jack studied the sky again. Low clouds, heavy air, the kind of weather that pressed sound down close to the ground. "Yeah," he said. "Probably." Collins nodded, like honesty helped. "Gear up," Jack said. "We move soon." They didn't ask where. They already knew. The landing craft smelled like oil, metal, and old fear. Men were packed inside so tight their knees touched, gear tangled together. Water sloshed at their boots as the craft slammed against the waves. Every impact sent a shudder through the hull and up into their bones. Someone vomited. Someone prayed. Someone stared straight ahead, eyes unblinking. Jack stood near the front, gripping the rail, legs braced. Spray soaked his face, cold enough to sting. The engine roared, drowning out everything else. Private Collins leaned closer, shouting over the noise. "Sergeant, you think the pictures are real? You know, the beaches?" Jack didn't answer right away. "I think," he said finally, "they don't show the smell." Collins swallowed hard and nodded. Through the mist, the coastline appeared. Then shapes. Then flashes of light. Gunfire. Jack raised his voice. Not screaming, just cutting through the noise. 30 seconds. Stay low. Follow me." Hands tightened on rifles. Helmets shifted. Breath caught in throats. Jack felt the familiar weight settle in his chest. Not fear exactly. Responsibility. This was the moment when rank stopped being a patch on your sleeve and became something heavier. Chapter 3. Omaha Beach. The ramp dropped. The world exploded. Bullets tore into the water like it was alive, snapping and splashing, men going down before they understood they'd started moving. The air filled with noise. Gunfire, screaming, metal tearing apart. Jack jumped. The water was freezing, dragging at his legs, pulling him down. He stumbled, recovered, pushed forward. Boots hit sand. Then something soft. He didn't look. "Move!" he yelled. They ran, bent over, bullets snapping overhead, sand erupting around them. Jack grabbed Collins by the strap of his pack and dragged him behind a twisted steel obstacle. Collins was shaking so hard Jack thought his teeth might break. "You hit?" Jack shouted. "No, no, Sergeant." "Good. Then breathe." Jack scanned the beach in fragments. Smoke. Craters. Men pinned down, going nowhere. The bluffs above spitting fire. This wasn't a charge. It was a crawl. They moved when they could, inches at a time, dragging the wounded, leaving the dead because stopping meant joining them. Jack realized he was bleeding somewhere. He didn't check. Pain was background noise now. Reaching the seawall felt unreal. Men slumped against it, gasping, eyes hollow. Someone laughed hysterically. Someone else rocked back and forth, helmet gone, hair matted with blood. Jack crouched, forcing his mind to work. Up there. That's where it stops. He looked at his squad. Fewer faces than he remembered. "All right," he said. Calm, steady. "We're moving." No cheers, no hesitation. They climbed through smoke and rubble, fingers digging into dirt, boots slipping. Grenades went up first, then men. At the top, the world changed. The guns fell silent one by one. Jack collapsed behind a hedgerow, chest heaving. They were inland. Barely. Chapter 4. Nightfall in France. France smelled like crushed grass and blood. Night came fast, bringing cold, and a silence that felt wrong after so much noise. Jack counted his men again, and again. Collins was still there. Hayes, too. 3 others he couldn't remember losing. He didn't let himself dwell on names. That night, Jack wrote a letter by flashlight, hands trembling with exhaustion. "Dear Mom, I'm alive. That's all I can promise." He folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Outside, someone whispered a prayer. Jack stared into the dark and waited for morning. Morning didn't bring relief. It brought hedgerows, thick, ancient walls of dirt and roots, packed so tight they felt engineered rather than grown. Every field was boxed in. Every crossing was a gamble. You couldn't see more than a few yards ahead, and the air felt trapped, heavy with the smell of damp soil and crushed leaves. Jack hated places like this. Open ground was honest. You knew where death could come from. Here, it could be anywhere. They moved slowly, rifles up, boots sinking into the mud. Jack's eyes never stopped moving. Left, right, tree line, gap in the hedge. A single shot cracked. Jack dropped instantly. Down! The firefight lasted less than a minute. It felt longer. When it ended, a German soldier lay face down near the hedge, blood darkening the soil. Jack glanced once, then looked away. Looking longer never helped. Hayes wiped mud from his cheek. "This country's trying to kill us," he muttered. Jack nodded. "It's doing a decent job." Chapter 5. The Farmhouse. They reached the farmhouse at dusk. Half the roof was gone. Chickens wandered freely, clucking like nothing unusual was happening. Smoke drifted from a crooked chimney. A woman stood in the doorway, thin, rigid, holding a child against her chest. Her eyes followed every movement Jack made. He raised a hand slowly. "American," he said. She didn't smile, didn't cry, just nodded and stepped aside. Inside smelled like old bread and wood smoke. Jack posted guards and let the men sit. Helmets came off, shoulders slumped. The woman brought water in the chipped cups. Her hands shook so badly some of it spilled. "You see Germans?" Jack asked gently. She hesitated, then shook her head. Jack believed her. Mostly. Later, the child stared at Jack's uniform, eyes wide. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of chocolate. He broke it in half and held it out. The child took it carefully, like it might disappear. "Merci," the woman whispered. Jack nodded. He didn't trust his voice. 2 days later, replacements arrived. One of them stood out immediately. Private Ethan Brooks, 19, Ohio, clean uniform, clean face, eyes too open. "Sergeant Miller," Brooks said, saluting a second too late. "Sir, my father fought in the last war." Jack studied him for a moment. "Then listen to him when you get home," Jack said. Brooks laughed nervously, not quite understanding. Jack assigned him to Hayes's fire team and made a quiet promise to himself to keep an eye on the kid. He hated making those promises. Chapter 6. The Lesson. The ambush came in a sunken lane. Textbook, perfect. Machine gun fire tore through the column. Men hit the dirt hard. Jack yelled orders without thinking, his voice cutting through panic like muscle memory. "Flank left!" "Smoke!" Brooks froze. Jack saw it instantly. "Brooks, move!" The bullet hit him before the second word finished leaving Jack's mouth. Jack crawled through mud and fire, dragged Brooks into cover. Blood soaked his hands, warm and slippery. "I didn't see it," Brooks whispered, eyes wide. "I know," Jack said, pressing down hard. "Stay with me." "I don't want to die." Jack swallowed. "I know." Brooks's breathing slowed, then stopped. Jack stayed there a second longer than he should have. Then he stood up and kept fighting. That night, no one talked. Jack sat alone, helmet beside him, staring at nothing. He replayed the moment over and over. The hesitation, the timing, the way it could have been different. Leadership meant carrying that, not medals, not praise, that. He crushed a cigarette into the dirt and didn't light another. Chapter 7. Paris isn't the war. Paris was loud. Crowds cheered. Flowers flew. Wine appeared from nowhere. Women kissed strangers in uniform, laughing and crying at the same time. Jack stood at the edge of it all, rifle slung, expression empty. This wasn't his war. A woman grabbed his arm, shouting thanks in rapid French. Jack smiled politely and stepped back. Behind the celebration, he saw boarded windows, thin faces, men who would never celebrate anything again. Hayes nudged him. "You all right, Sarge?" Jack nodded. "Yeah." It was a lie that sounded real enough. Belgium froze everything solid. Snow-covered roads, weapons, bodies, like the world was trying to forget what it had seen. The cold cut deeper than bullets. Fingers went numb. Rifles jammed. Men shook in their sleep. Jack stayed awake as much as he could. Leaders didn't freeze. When the Germans hit in the Ardennes, it felt like the war had decided to bite back hard. Shells screamed. Trees shattered. Men vanished into smoke and snow. Jack dragged Collins out of a collapsed foxhole, yelling until his throat burned. They held. Barely. They didn't know it was a camp at first, just fences, wire. Silence. Then the smell hit them. Men behind the wire looked like shadows pretending to be human. One reached out, fingers skeletal. "Americans," he whispered. Jack nodded. The man cried. Jack turned away, jaw locked. This was why. Not flags, not speeches. This. Chapter 8. Germany. Germany wasn't triumphant. It was hollow. Cities reduced to bones. Civilians moved through rubble like survivors of something no one could explain. A little girl offered Jack a piece of bread. He hesitated, took it. "Danke," he said quietly. She smiled. Jack didn't smile back. April came quietly. No speeches, no sense of triumph. Just orders, passed down the line with tired voices that had learned not to expect miracles. Secure the crossroads. Hold until relieved. Jack read the order twice, not because it was complicated, but because habits were hard to break. He gathered what was left of his squad in the early morning light. The sky was pale, washed out, like it had seen enough. Collins stood there, thinner now, eyes older. Hayes leaned on his rifle, chewing nothing. Two others Jack barely remembered joining the unit. "All right," Jack said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Same rules. Watch each other. Don't get creative. No jokes, no nods. Just quiet understanding." They moved out. The crossroads sat between two ruined buildings, stone walls blackened by fire. Smoke still hung in the air, thin and sour. Somewhere nearby, artillery thumped, distant and tired. The firefight started fast. German soldiers pushed hard, desperate. Jack could see it in the way they moved, sharp, aggressive, like men who knew there wasn't much left to lose. "Left flank!" Jack shouted. A shell exploded close enough to knock him sideways. Pain tore through his leg, white and blinding. Shrapnel. He knew it instantly. Jack didn't go down. Pain could wait. He dragged himself behind cover, firing, yelling orders, refusing to let the world shrink to the size of his wound. Blood soaked his pant leg, warm and heavy. They held the crossroads. When it ended, Jack finally sat down. His hands shook now. The adrenaline drained away, leaving nothing but ache and exhaustion. A medic knelt beside him. "Sergeant, you're done." Jack nodded. For once, he didn't argue. Chapter 9. Silence. The silence came without warning. One day there were shots. The next there weren't. No engines, no artillery, no shouting, just birds. Someone said it out loud, almost afraid to break it. "It's over." Jack sat on the edge of a ruined wall, helmet slipping from his fingers, and stared at the ground. Over. The word felt thin, fragile, like it might tear if you held it too tightly. Men laughed, some cried, some just sat there, unsure what to do with hands that weren't holding weapons. Jack felt nothing. Then everything. They returned to the camp days later with trucks and doctors and food. Jack watched prisoners eat slowly, carefully, like they didn't trust the food to stay. He watched men who had survived hell look at the sky like they were seeing it for the first time. One man grabbed Jack's sleeve. "You came," he said in broken English. "You came." Jack nodded. He didn't tell the man how close they'd come to never arriving at all. Chapter 10. The Way Home. The ship back to America was quieter than the one that had brought him to war. Men stood at the rails, watching the ocean stretch endlessly, like it might wash something clean. Some talked about home. Some didn't talk at all. Collins found Jack near the stern. "Guess we made it, huh, Sarge?" Jack nodded. "Yeah," he said. "We did." Collins flexed his damaged hand, missing fingers catching the light. "Think it'll ever make sense?" Jack didn't answer right away. "No," he said finally, "but it'll get quieter." America looked untouched. Too clean. Too loud. Bands played. Flags waved. People cheered men they didn't know for things they didn't understand. Jack stood at the edge of it all, stiff, unsure where to put his hands. A woman asked him, smiling brightly, "Was it worth it?" Jack thought of Brooks, of the camp, of the child in France, of the girl in Germany with the bread. "Yes," he said, "but it cost more than most people will ever see." Chapter 11. The Years After. Jack didn't talk much about the war. He worked, married, woke up early, learned which noises didn't matter anymore. Some nights he still heard the beach, still smelled smoke and wet earth, still saw faces that never aged. He kept one thing from the war. Not a medal, not a photograph, a folded letter. "Dear Mom, I'm alive." He kept it in a drawer by his bed. Years later, when the world felt quiet enough to breathe again, Jack understood something he hadn't during the war. The last order wasn't given by a general. It wasn't written on paper. It was simple. Stay. Remember. Live. Every morning, Jack followed it, and that was enough. Chapter 12. The Train Station. The train station smelled like coal, old wood, and something sweet that reminded Jack of childhood summers. Apples, maybe, or dust warmed by the sun. He stood on the platform with his duffel bag at his feet, watching people move with purpose. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going. Husbands kissed wives. Children ran ahead, laughing, pulling suitcases too big for their hands. Jack stayed still. When his name was called over the loudspeaker, it felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. He boarded the train and found an empty seat by the window. As the engine lurched forward, the platform began to slide away. Faces blurred. Waving hands became shapes, then nothing. Jack rested his forehead against the glass. "This is it," he thought again. But this time it didn't feel final. It felt unfamiliar. Home was quieter than Jack remembered. Not peaceful, just quiet. The house looked the same porch, same fence, same worn step he'd tripped on as a boy. His mother hugged him tightly, hands gripping his coat like she was afraid he might vanish if she let go. "You're home," she said, voice breaking. Jack nodded. "Yeah, I'm home." But at night, the quiet pressed in on him. No gunfire, no engines, no shouted orders, just the sound of his own breathing. That was the hardest part. Chapter 13. Civilian Time. Civilian time moved differently. In the Army, everything happened when it had to. Now, clocks mattered again. Appointments, meals, conversations that wandered without purpose. Jack found work easily enough. People respected uniforms. They shook his hand, called him a hero. He didn't correct them. At work, he followed instructions, kept his head down, did his job well. Leadership habits didn't disappear just because the war was over. But sometimes, when someone dropped a tool or slammed a door, his body reacted before his mind caught up. He learned to hide that, too. The names came back at night. Not every night, but often enough. Brooks, the man at the camp who cried, the child in France, the girl in Germany with the bread. Jack didn't talk about them. Talking felt like opening a door that wouldn't close again. Instead, he sat on the porch in the evenings, listening to cicadas, watching the sky change colors. He focused on small things, the sound of wind in trees, the creak of the porch boards. Survival, he'd learned, was built out of details. Chapter 14. The Question. One Sunday afternoon, sitting at a family table heavy with food and noise, someone asked it again. "Do you miss it?" Jack looked up. "Miss what?" "The war." The table went quiet. Jack thought for a long moment. "No," he said finally, "but I remember it." That seemed to satisfy no one, but it was the closest thing to the truth he could offer. Years passed. Life filled in around the war like water filling a hole in the ground. Not erasing it, just covering it enough to live around. Jack married. He laughed sometimes. He learned how to sleep again, little by little. One evening, while cleaning, he opened the drawer by his bed. The letter was still there, folded, worn, familiar. "I'm alive." Jack held it for a long time. Alive didn't mean untouched. It didn't mean whole. It meant present. Chapter 15. The Last Meaning. Jack understood something then that he hadn't during the war. Victory wasn't surviving. Victory was choosing to stay human afterward, to remember without drowning, to carry the weight without passing it on. The last order wasn't about holding ground or taking hills. It was quieter than that. Wake up, keep going, pay attention. Jack folded the letter back into the drawer and closed it gently. Outside, the evening air was warm, and for the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't hurt.